So welcome everyone to the Linguistics Open Day events today. My name is Dr. Adam Chong. I'm a lecturer in linguistics in the department. Right, so welcome. So this is the Linguistics and English Language overview talk. Before we get started about our program, I think it's good to just get everyone on the same page as to what is linguistics? Linguistics isn't something that you usually get at A level, so in schools. People might come into it in different ways. So what exactly is linguistics and what do we do? So linguistics is really the science or the study of human language from a kind of scientific perspective. And we're concerned with basically anything related to language, how it's developed, how it's able to create infinite new meanings from fairly limited building blocks. And what we mean by that will become a little bit apparent potentially in the taster talk that David will give. How it's learned and represented in the brain. And what we mean by this is both in terms of how a kid, so a little baby, right, as well as adults learn language, and how does that actually represented in our minds or brains, and how we actually use it in a day-to-day setting to shape our identities, to shape our communities, and how does this actually change across one's lifespan, but also at a community level across, across history, right? How does language change? How does English change? How does different languages change, right? And then depending on the context. Now, what is English language in this context? So at least the kind of work that we do in our department, English language is kind of linguistics with a focus on the specifics about English's trajectory in terms of use as well as history, and how it's really developed new forms and meanings over time and geographic space, right? Especially given that English is used across the world in different contexts, how does this actually differ, right? And what are the certain similarities? So within the English language parts of the program, you kind of go into more details in these specific aspects, so specifically on English language. Okay, so as linguists, what we're really interested in general is really trying to uncover all the kind of subconscious patterns and rules that we all have as speakers or signers or whatever, as language users, right, that enable us to communicate on a day-to-day basis. A lot of these are things which you are not aware of, that there are things that are basically you just do automatically. That's why we call these subconscious rules, right? And so part of our jobs, or our main jobs as our interest in terms of language, is to try and uncover what these subconscious patterns are in language. And these are going to be some things that you're going to have your hand at in David's talk later today. Okay, so how does one study language? So you might be wondering, how do we actually, when we talk about studying language as a science, what does this mean, right? There are a myriad of different ways of doing this. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of these here. We can look at, you can see this here, this is news talk, so you can just look at how language is in the media, right? So how is language used in different kinds of media, social media and so forth. You can't really quite see this here because of the screen. This is a syntax tree, so if you're interested in sentence structure, right, we can sort of figure out how this might be represented in our minds. We can look at accent bias ratings here. Sort of some recent work by members of the department have looked at how people perceive different kinds of British accents in different ways and the kinds of values, judgments that might be made upon that. Getting a little bit more kind of on the hard sciences end of things. This is work that I do. This is a ultrasound image of a person's tongue. So what we're also interested in is the nitty-gritty details of how people actually speak in real time. So what happens when I, am talking right now, right? How does the actual physical movements of my tongue, right, translate into speech? As this person on the top right-hand corner there is actually measuring. And even further away from that in terms of into kind of the psychological sciences, this image right here is an image of brain responses. Right? So as you can see, within sort of language sciences of linguistics and English language, the kinds of things that people do or the things that people are interested in really run the gamut. Right? You can have things much more on the humanities side of looking at language in the media, language in literature, but also all the way into the kind of behavioral sciences. Right? So this is a kind of breadth that you can sort of really get into within this field. And so what would you study in our program? So we pride ourselves at Queen Mary and in our department in having a program that's really broad. we basically cover more or less the entire range of subfields within linguistics. So you might look, for example, at phonetics and phonology, which is my area of specialty. So looking at how the sound systems of languages are. How do we produce sounds? How do we perceive them? How do we perceive speech? How does a baby learn to basically learn speech without really actually being taught it? You might be exposed to looking at morphology and syntax, which is how words are put together, how they are built. How do I say, better from good and so forth, and how these words are then put into a larger sentence, right? Because there's a pattern here. So what are those kinds of restrictions? You can also look at semantics. So how does putting a sentence together generate sort of specific meanings, and how does that change depending on how you switch things around? Relatedly, you can also look at psycholinguistics. So this is how the brain or how our mind actually kind of interprets language in the real time, right? So essentially kind of the more psychological aspects of it, as well as historical and social linguistics, which looks at how language changes, as well as how language is used in sort of identity marking and so forth in the community. So sociolinguistics is a really popular area that a lot of our students actually get already at English language A level. One of the things that I think we really are proud of as a department is that the breadth of options that we give students to be able to explore these different interests, right? Whether you're more interested in the technical side of things in, say, syntax and phonology, to more sociolinguistics, or a combination of both. These are things you can do very easily within our program. And we offer several bespoke career services events. We have a very good relationship with the career services department that really supports students for specifically some things which are more linguistically oriented, such as speech language therapy, that a lot of our students have been going into post their bachelor's degree, right? So we have a huge range of career services events that we support students with throughout the year. So why us in a very nutshell? We're going to go through a bit of the programs and sort of snippets of each of our different programs, but what is the profile of the department? So as you saw in the principal's sort of introduction, we are a very research successful department. So the department has been ranked first in research in the last 2 research exercises. And overall, from the teaching perspective, we've done pretty well at sort of keeping our students happy, right? So our natural student survey ratings have been pretty good in the last few years. So what we do here is really combine sort of the research aspects of our jobs, as well as a really big dedication to the actual classroom teaching environment, right? So these are kind of synergistic rather than separate things. Okay. Obviously, I won't go through too much about the sort of London setting and a campus tour. If you're interested in the campus tour as well, make sure you go out to that after the session today. So the degree program. So what I'm going to go through here is just a brief overview of our core single honors degree programs. And I will also talk a little bit about our joint honors degree programs, although there's a bit more less to sort of specify with those. But if you have any questions about these, please feel free to ask us at the question and answer period or in the welcome area later today as well. So we offer 3 single honors degrees programs within the department. The first is the Bachelor in Linguistics, so BA in Linguistics. And in this case, you're going to be focusing more on the kind of theoretical building blocks of language. So mostly things like phonology, syntax, and so forth, which sort of fall into kind of more technical aspects of this. You're also going to get strong foundations in sociolinguistics. So it's a really core kind of building block to sort of primarily focus more on the kind of theoretical aspects. In the BA English and Language, you're going to get similar types of training, but the emphasis is going to be a bit more on looking at English language type questions, right? So questions to do with how has English changed over time. I'm going to wait for a second for that to go by. This is the joys of having to talk outside. Okay, so in English language, you're going to be doing the same things in many ways in terms of getting the core training. But when it comes to kind of some of the other core classes, there's going to be a focus on things like the history of English, how English is in the current world, and so forth. And especially, and also how English is in the context of the UK, right? So language in the UK. And then we kind of have the kind of balanced degree in some ways where you basically get choices in both. So BA in English language and in linguistics, where you're going to have solid training in both of these, but where some of the required classes gets you to kind of look at English language as well, right? In addition to the single honors degrees, we have a slew of joint honors programs, both within the School of Languages and Linguistics and Film, as well as with the School of English and Drama. So we have a really popular degree of English Literature and Linguistics, so that's with the School of English and Drama, as well as Comparative Literature and Linguistics, and all the other kind of language and linguistics programs. So these are really good if you're sort of interested in language, in a specific modern language, but also interested in the science of language to kind of pair up these two programs. And I'll kind of mention sort of how these might look in terms of structure in a little bit. So as I said, across these three programs, there's going to be a lot of similarities in terms of what you're going to be trained in, right? So you're going to be trained in the core areas of understanding kind of the building blocks of human language, right? As well as sociolinguistics. The main difference is really going to be in terms of just different bits of focus, right, that you're asked to sort of specialize in as you kind of progress through the degree. What is our teaching like? So our class sizes vary quite a bit, but for the average class size, it's probably around 30 students. But we also have, I think our largest class is about 60. That's our first year introductory class that everyone takes, which is why it's the largest. But I've also taught classes that are maybe like between 15 and 20. So we have a huge range of class sizes. Typically, most modules meet 2 to 3 hours a week with additional individual staff feedback and advice hours, which run throughout the semester. We pride ourselves in having a very diverse set of assessments. So we don't just do essays, for example. Given the kind of work that we do and the kind of methods that people are interested in, you might do problem sets. So this is something like a little bit like maths. You might do research reports, which are a little bit different from just strict essays. Obviously, we can do essays, there are tests, and so forth. And this really sort of helps with developing a broad skill set, right? And many assessments in our program, not just sort of in the third year, but that sort of embedded through the actual degree, involve students collecting primary data in some way, shape, or form. So we really emphasize sort of the primary research aspects and data collection, data analysis from the get-go, from the first year. Right, so we really embed this in the assessment sort of profile of our classes. This means that students get firsthand experience very early on in sort of basically how do you do research in a kind of broad sense of things, right? And this might be to do with just collecting surveys, to recording people and then analyzing their speech, to looking at text. You know, it's a whole range of things. And as I sort of hopefully you're kind of getting, there's a lot of room for developing personal interests within each of these, which are the areas that we cover, right? That you might then want to go into more detail in your final year research project. As I said, and I won't cover this too much more, all our programs will allow you to develop practical skills that go beyond the classroom. So things like the International Phonetic Alphabet, which might not seem that applicable to a lot of things, but if you do anything like drama, speech, music, outside of linguistics, the IPA comes into very handy because it gives you a lot of help with understanding what speech sounds are like. And unique, I think, in some ways within the humanities and social sciences, our students really come out with both very good qualitative analysis training as well as quantitative analysis training. So this, you know, we are in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, depending on the field, that isn't always the case. And all students also get training in research methods as a preparation for their dissertations in their final year, but also these are really handy for just careers after university. Right, so a lot of our work obviously centers on English in the kind of UK context, and we've done a lot of work as well with English in the kind of East London context. So many of our modules sort of take East London or London in general as kind of a fertile examination ground for how English is sort of developing and changing. And this is sort of where as well, collecting data, primary data from the sort of London communities sort of helps inform your own kind of work. Okay, so what might your first year look like here? So most of our students will end up doing the same modules in the first year, because the first year in our program aims to equip all students with kind of the same core levels of competencies in order to then build on in the final second and third year. So in the first semester, all our students, regardless of whether or not you're in the single honors programs or the joint honors programs, will have to do what's called Foundations of Language. This is an introductory module to what is linguistics and how do we study language from a kind of scientific perspective. And this is just to ensure that all our students are trained in kind of the core areas before they move on to specializations. For our single honor students, in the first semester, they also will take Phonetics 1, which is an introduction to the sounds of English and thinking about how to describe the sounds of English or sounds of English and other languages, right, using the International Phonetic Alphabet, right? So this comes into really handy actually if you're a language learner yourself. And we also have a academic writing and sort of critical thinking skills class that we've actually introduced in response to student feedback from a few years ago. So that's been something that we've developed. And the goal for this is to actually introduce to students the kind of range of types of sort of assessments, the kinds of writing and presentation styles that will actually come in handy through the other modules that they'll have to do throughout the rest of the degree, right? As I said, because we do a fairly diverse set of different types of things, really, many students may not have had the opportunity to say, do a research report at A levels, just because of the kinds of subjects you might do, right? Or do a data analysis type report, right? So the first year and the first semester, that module sort of helps get students up to speed with, here's the kind of range of things that you're going to be expected to do over the course of your degree, and just to kind of get practice with that. In the second semester, things sort of open up a little bit, this is where our 3 different single honors degrees differ a little bit as to what is a required class. So most of our students will end up doing Sociolinguistics and Syntax, which is the structure of English. So how do we describe the structure of English sentences? But depending on which of the single honors degrees that you're in, you're going to be doing either Phonology 1, which is Introduction to Sound Systems, or Language Acquisition, or looking at the world's languages and what's common and different between them, or Language in the UK, right? So this is where our single honors degrees differ a little bit, just in terms of the focus of what it is that what is required of you. I should say that if you're interested in finding out more about each of these programs or each of these modules, if you just go to the program directory on the school's website, you'll be able to sort of see details about what is involved in each of these modules. I should mention a little bit about what our joint honors students do in the first year. So for the linguistics aspects of a joint honors degree, say in comparative literature, all our students will still do Foundations of Language. So that's all our students, regardless of single honors programs. But as far as required classes go in the second semester, if you're a joint honors student, there really isn't any required classes because it's sort of a choose your own adventure kind of situation with our joint honors students, because of the fact that it really depends on what they kind of want to work on. So this is where we do a lot of advising to try and separate students into areas that will be of their interest, right? So I should say that you'll notice that in the first semester, all 3 of our programs, single honors programs, are basically the same, right? It's really only in the second semester where they do diverge a little bit. So there's a little bit of room there for you to kind of decide potentially if you decide that maybe you want to switch on to a different single honors program after the first semester. Yes, and so one thing that I think is really important to say again is that and this is something we really emphasize here, is that all single honors students really have the opportunity to undertake original research in an area of their interests, right, in their third year. And they're obviously supported with this through different workshops and so forth, but this is a great opportunity for people to really, explore things. And a lot of our students really enjoy this. It's stressful. That's no doubt about that. It's a little bit stressful, but they kind of come out at the end of it really happy that they've done it, because it really pushes them to kind of, explore different areas, but also kind of come up with a product that they can kind of show, here's what I've done, right? Here are some examples of the kinds of projects our students have done in the past. So some students have looked at things like the effect of cognitive stress on lexical retrieval. This means on recalling words, looking at psycholinguistics. This dissertation actually won the Linguistics Association of Great Britain Prize. We've had students look at bilingualism in the classroom, so looking at classroom teaching, whether or not the rap affects stuttering, so a speech disorders type thing. Looking at politeness strategies and customer service interactions, so a slightly very different type of project, as well as gender features in multicultural London English. So the range of things that I've sort of been talking about from the start sort of are reflected in the kinds of projects our students are interested in doing too. And we'd like to support students in kind of really chasing down these individual interests, right, beyond specifics. In addition to the 3-year programs, all our programs have a 4-year degree option if you're interested in, which is to say to take a full-year study abroad, which seems a bit bizarre at the moment given the global pandemic, but we do have a student going to Seoul next year. And if you're enrolled in a 4-year degree program, so you take the 3rd year, so this after your 2nd year, abroad in one of our sort of partner destinations. So currently, most of our destination partners are in the Asia Pacific region. Seoul National has been, interestingly, really popular amongst many of our students, as well as in Europe, so Potsdam and Zurich, as well as in North America. So the University of California, which is where I did my PhD, is on the list, and it's very popular amongst many of our students as well. You can enroll directly into a 4-year degree program at the time of admission, or if you decide after your 1st year here that actually, this is something I want to sort of try, there's an opportunity to kind of enroll into that or change it into that program after your 1st year. And I just want to say that we're increasingly also involving students more in actual laboratory research or research in the department. As I said, we are a research-led teaching department. So a lot of our work that we do in research feeds into our teaching. We have facilities that include the Phonetics Lab, which is where we record people. And many of our students have used this to record speakers for their own projects pre-COVID. At the moment, that's not quite possible. We also have students who've sort of done some volunteer work in the Acquisition Lab, which looks at how kids acquire language, as well as a new lab that looks at psycholinguistic processing. Obviously, these are all pending the pandemic ending at this point, but this is something that we hope to kind of build on going forward. And a lot of our work has kind of made its way into different textbooks, into popular press. So this is Language Unlimited is a sort of popular science textbook, or book rather, by David Adger, one of our senior members of staff. As well as into actually just sort of the popular media. In fact, Devyani Sharma, who's a member of the department, was recently interviewed by the BBC on her accent bias project. Right. So a lot of our work sort of informs both our research, it both informs our teaching, but also kind of sort of has broader societal kind of exposure. In general, this is a sort of department photo with the postgraduate students and staff. We're a very friendly department. This is something I think we like to kind of mention. It doesn't seem like it's something that's worth mentioning, but we are. We're a very friendly department, a very approachable department, and something that we're happy to kind of maintain. So I'll just sort of show this to you very briefly, but all our staff members are listed on our site. If you're interested to know more about each individual's work and what they teach, feel free to just consult our website. So before, I'm conscious of the time because I'm running over, but we have a little bit of a break, so this is good. One thing that we're always asked to kind of, that I'm sure you're all thinking about because this is important, is what abilities will you actually leave with, right? What will you develop in our programs? And something that I hope is a thread, and you've kind of got onto this in what I've been saying, is that linguistics is unusual, I think, or we think, in equipping students with a really diverse set of skills. Right? Just because of the kinds of subdisciplines that we do that require different kinds of ways of thinking, really, approaching data, right? It really sort of pushes you to kind of sometimes go out of your comfort zone. So a lot of our students are not necessarily super, happy doing quantitative stuff, right? Looking like using Excel, but, we kind of push them to do it, and it's useful, right? Even though you might not ever do it that much in your actual work. So we combine methods and skills from both the humanities and social sciences, but also the cognitive sciences. So really, it's kind of the triumvirate of different things. Using evidence to build on arguments in a very coherent and logical way. Skills of fieldwork and gathering data, so working with people, right, to gather data, right? The ability to see patterns in complicated situations. This is something that we really think linguistics is great for. You'll see an example of this in David's talk. And confidence in learning new systems, right? Because each module is going to be a little bit different from the other one. They do build on each other, but there's going to be slight twists. And ultimately, sort of the more soft skills are just understanding the fact that human behavior and communication is sensitive to context, right? And how to navigate that in the real world. Our students have gone into a number of different careers, both in terms of IT and information technology. Education, obviously, is a major one. Publishing and media. Marketing and branding is sort of not an obvious one, but is a thing that a number of our students have gone into, as well as research and policy development. So anything that kind of requires turning through data and understanding data in a complex, nuanced way. Yeah, I just mentioned this. Okay. I'm going to leave this for you to watch online since it's on YouTube. Okay, so these are just sort of some examples of where some of our students have ended up. So these are jobs in different kinds of areas. A number of our students have also gone on to postgraduate work, both in linguistics at places like Oxford and Cambridge, but also, as I said before, in speech and language therapy, which are very competitive master's programs. And we've had a lot of success in placing students on those in the recent years. So I'm going to sort of end here and give you some time for questions. We'll bleed into a little bit of the sort of break period, if that's okay. So that's it from me.